now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, especially when it's so gorgeous outside. I appreciate you being here. I am Jessica Mansbach. I'm the Co-Associate Director of the Faculty Center, and I want to thank my colleague Jack, who's behind the scenes, helping with the slides, and he'll be jumping in to help with the chat later. So this session will focus on designing activities, assignments, and tests that promote academic integrity. So in the next slide, I will tell you a little bit about the intent of the session and the plan for the session. So what I'd like us to do today is I'm going to very briefly define academic integrity, talk about its importance, and then we'll spend some time discussing the instructor's role in educating students about academic integrity and the instructor's role in designing thoughtful assignments and exams. So after I define academic integrity, there'll be 3 sections of the presentation. After each section, we'll have a break so folks can answer some questions in the chat. So you'll be invited to participate in the chat at a couple different points throughout the session. We will not have any breakout rooms. We'll also spend some time reviewing sample assignments that are on FCIP's website and that you should have received if you registered for the workshop. And as always, our session is being recorded and all of our materials, including the chat, will be shared after the session. So in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about academic integrity. Before we jump into specific examples of assignments that promote academic integrity, let's first take a minute to establish a definition of academic integrity. So according to the International Center for Academic Integrity is a commitment, even in the face of adversity, to 6 fundamental values: honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. From these values flow principles of behavior that enable academic communities to translate ideals to action. Adhering to the values and policies that flow from these values is a shared responsibility among students and educators. We can see how this definition from the International Center for Academic Integrity is reflected in parts of Loyola's definition. Loyola's definition references a genuine learning community, giving proper recognition to other sources, which are acts of personal, professional courtesy and of intellectual honesty. So in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about why academic integrity is important. So a couple of things. We want to model and promote ethical and honest behavior as instructors, particularly at a Jesuit university. And this means that students should submit their own work or acknowledge whose work they are using in the formation of their work. We also want to be able to accurately assess students' learning. So in a classroom context, of course, academic integrity helps instructors determine whether students have accomplished the learning outcomes. And in order to assess student learning, we need to know that students are submitting their own work. So as an instructor, what are your responsibilities? In the next slide, I'll mention that part of your role is to create and maintain a culture of academic integrity at Loyola. And to do this, you'll want to consider your role in educating students about academic integrity and designing thoughtful assignments and exams. So let's look a little bit more closely at the educating students piece of the responsibility in the next slide. So a couple of ways to educate students about academic integrity. I'll make a few suggestions and then I'll open it up in the chat. So first, I recommend including a statement regarding academic integrity in your syllabus. I would imagine many of you do this. There is boilerplate language that we can provide for you if you're looking for some additional language. Then we recommend providing students with resources they can use to learn more about academic integrity. So the university libraries, for example, has a really nice academic integrity quiz. It's a set of true and false questions that you can share with your students, and I can share the link to this in the rest of the resources we share. Also, we recommend sharing information about where students can get academic support. So the Writing Center, university libraries. Sometimes students, particularly students who did not go through the US school system, violate academic integrity because they don't know what the rules are. What are the conventions? What are the expectations? How should they document things? When should they document things? And so this piece of educating students is really important. So in the chat, I'd like us to take a few minutes to discuss what are some other examples people have related to how they educate students about academic integrity. So I'll invite folks to contribute in the chat, and the next slide shows the question. There we go. So Susan McCarthy, you indicated that you give examples and allow students to discuss. Can you unmute yourself? You didn't know I was going to put you on the spot, but can you unmute yourself, please, and talk a little bit about what examples you're referring to and how you do that?
I use student work, obviously masking names and all that, and let students decide, does this meet the standard of academic integrity?
So work from prior students in prior classes?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I also I teach business classes, so we talk about academic integrity, sort of integrity within the business field, and use examples from sort of real world.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. What other examples do people have? And I'm sorry, I'll toss this back over to you, Jack, to.
No problem. Looks like Cerrito does a plagiarism workshop, kind of, again, using case examples to decide if something needs a citation or not. I think similar to Susan's example, but maybe more closely defined as a plagiarism workshop. Barbara indicates that she has students sign an honor pledge, kind of holding a way to hold each other accountable. And then just the various comments about, what is a proper citation, helping students understand how to cite things, the difference between in-text citations and footnotes, for example. Yeah, those are some of the responses that are floating up. Does anybody else have any other things they'd like to contribute to the chat?
So we're a smaller group today, so I'll invite people to unmute themselves at different points. So does anyone else use an honor pledge? And if so, what kind of success have they had with it? Not so much. Okay, so some of you have used honor pledges. Okay.
Barbara, do you want to briefly explain? I know I've heard you talk about your struggles with Chegg and this idea of Googling answers instead of actively learning. This is probably more applicable to your discipline than others maybe, but do you want to just briefly kind of explain that?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I teach accounting, and I also hear there's some relevance in math, and perhaps when some of the sciences are more foundational, less lab oriented, but particularly math. We use homework managers from publishers and some test bank questions. And we're getting a little savvy at manipulating them, but I'm not that familiar with Chegg, but I'm seeing it in my students. Occasionally I'll have students who complete homework incredibly quickly, and at very, very high scores. And then they have some of the lowest exam scores. And this didn't used to happen to me a few years ago. And then there's a tool called Chegg, C-H-E-G-G, where it's my understanding students can pay, it's like $25 or $26 maybe. Again, I'm speaking out of ignorance here. And it's basically a tutoring service. But I think sometimes it may cross the line into an answering service. But like I'm hearing things from my colleagues in accounting, not here at Loyola, but at other places, you need to make a test less than 46 minutes because the average answer back time on Chegg is 46 minutes. And I guess I'm here with open hands trying to understand the concept of like Googling for answers and using tools like Chegg. And my understanding is even when I manually rewrite a problem, if they've purchased an answering service, they can obtain that answer in 46 minutes. But I don't want to overstate. I guess I'm looking to be educated on this and try to develop some new techniques because they're low-level foundational classes. And I understand the value of critical thinking, but I'm also trying to be super friendly, and I don't want to scare them out of a field that's already kind of intimidating. So I kind of like to stay low on Bloom's, but I'm reaching a point where I'm going to have to go up higher. Anyhow, I don't want to, anyhow.
Thank you. No,
a lot of talking on my part.
It's okay. No, I just wanted to, I think your issue is an important one, and I just wanted to kind of have you explain it in your own words. I see that Sarita has her hand up. You just removed it down. All right. Go ahead.
This may be useful for you, Barbara, or maybe not. So I teach art history, and the biggest thing I have a problem with is students you find Google stuff that are on their research papers, and I specifically forbid Google searches. And I'm like, absolutely not. In your case, you could ask them to quote unquote show their work and ask where they got that source from. It'll be a pain in your ass because you'll have to take longer to grade it to make sure people aren't screwing you over, but you could make them show their work essentially.
And Sarita, one thing I did during the pandemic was I created a discussion board. And at the beginning, I had a lot of pushback, but I was able to do some pretty low level on Bloom's cases with discussion board where they had to add more language around their answers. And it was really, really an effective tool. And so I'm trying to do more discussion boards, but in accounting, like in math and some other fields, I think you really do learn by doing and doing a bunch of low-level problems over and over again until you understand the foundational skill sets. But I agree with you that showing your work is a big part of it.
And I was going to say, Barbara, that I do the same thing. Like students, when they come to Loyola, the majority of them are used to using Google as a research tool, and that's it. And I'm like, no, you're going to get acquainted with using the library. So my core classes, I absolutely require them to go into the library, take a picture of themselves in the library, in the stacks, use a hard copy book as one of their sources.
Sarita, what subject matter do you teach?
Art history.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. And I think the other piece of it that I'd really like to network with is if there's anyone online who teaches like foundational math classes, like I think that, because we have a quantitative answer that's correct. And a tutor can do the work and come up with that answer for the student is what I'm understanding. I mean, I've never paid for Chegg, so I've never gone in and actually looked at it. I'm speaking right now from gossip, but I can see a change in the quality of my students' work. And there's definitely something going on there. But I appreciate it, and taking pictures of students while they're working is a good idea, Sarita.
Okay,
Thank you. We're gonna move forward. I know that there are a lot of online resources that students have access to, which raise concerns about the integrity of their work. So what we'll spend the rest of the time doing is talking about some strategies. I know the strategies are not necessarily foolproof, but they are hopefully going to give you some ideas. The other thing to think about is how you're weighting different areas of the course. And do the exams need to be weighed more than the discussion, or can we weigh the discussion more? So that's one thing to think about. We'll dive into the next section, on instructor responsibilities. So this might go without saying, but well-designed assignments promote academic integrity. They make it more difficult for students to cheat. And in order to talk about what constitutes a well-designed assignment, I invite us to look at some of the assignments designed by our colleagues. So I taught the online teaching course twice this summer, the course on design, and I asked a couple faculty if I could use their assignments as examples of well-designed assignments, and a few faculty graciously approved. So you can either pull up the documents that were emailed to you, the Word documents, or Jack, if you want to put the link to the documents in the chat. That would be helpful. So first, we're going to look at the trigger warnings reflection assignment. I'll just give folks a chance to get to that.
So I've put the link to the page where these assignments are. The trigger warning assignment should be the assignment number 1.
Yep.
But the three are linked kind of midway down the page. And I'm going to quickly switch to sharing screen so everyone, for those of you who can't access the documents, you can still see. So give me 1 second here.
Thanks, Jack. Okay. So we're looking at a trigger warning reflection assignment. So this is an assignment created for Women in Literature class by Virginia Bell, the instructor who graciously agreed to share this. And this was a guided reflection using VoiceThread. So I'm not going to read the assignment word for word, we all have it. But I do want to highlight some of the features of this assignment that make it well designed. And then in a few minutes, I'll talk briefly about how those elements of the design enhance academic integrity. So first, it's always a good idea to state the purpose of the assignments to students. It may seem obvious in your mind why they're doing the assignment, but it's likely not obvious to students. This is especially important when we're teaching online and we may not be interacting with our students as much. So always thinking about sharing the purpose of the assignment with the students. That's also a nice way for you to self-check and make sure the assignment has a purpose. So from the purpose of the assignment that you've created, you should also be able to generate learning outcomes. So what skills should the students be able to demonstrate after they complete their assignment? So for this particular assignment, the goal is to define trigger warning and then ultimately come up with recommendations that will guide how trigger warnings are used in the class. So this is a really creative idea and really prompts students to reflect, makes use of some of the tools we have, and is a successful assignment for these reasons. So in addition to the purpose and the outcomes, then we want to provide instructions. And again, here, as you might be learning through trial and error, the more specific, the better. The instructions in our mind might seem obvious, but again, they're not obvious to students. So what do they need to do to complete the assignment? And by providing these instructions, we're not giving students the answers. We're just telling them what are the mechanics of the process they should go through to complete the assignment. What should they look at? How should they submit it? How should they use VoiceThread? Things like that. So then the other aspects of this assignment which make it strong are the fact that Virginia directs them to which resources they should use to do the assignment. So should they be looking at course resources? Should they be watching other things that she's providing for the assignment? Should they be doing their own research? So including the materials. And then finally, including an assessment. And I know that there are debates around the use of rubrics, but in the online teaching course, we require that every student creates a rubric of some sort to show that they can use this as a tool to provide feedback. So here it is clear to students, again, how they'll be evaluated and what the expectations are. So those are some of the features that make this assignment well designed. And this is for women's studies class, but could be adapted to another course. Next, we'll turn our attention to the short essay exam. And then we'll come back to more specifically the academic integrity piece. So Jack is sharing the short essay exam. So this is an exam. So this is supposed to be about assignments and exams. So this is an exam, but could also be an assignment. And this was shared by Matthew Williams, an instructor in the sociology department. And this is rather long, but also contains many of the elements that were evident in Virginia's assignment. So again, why are they doing the assignment? What is the purpose? Here, there are some of the logistics up front, so how it should be submitted. This assignment I wanted to highlight because it does a really nice job of outlining expectations for academic integrity. So letting students know that their work will go through Turnitin, which will check for plagiarism. And then doing a really nice job specifying what is a deliverable, what are students doing. It's an essay exam, but Matthew isn't looking for a 4-page response, he's looking for 500 words. This is a nice way of encouraging students to synthesize their knowledge and understanding and explain it concisely. So here again, we have the prompt, well explained, the outcomes of the exam, what they should be able to do, what skills they should be demonstrating in their essay. And then this is another way of doing a rubric. And he outlines several criteria that he will use to grade the exam. This is very specific, very clear. And then as we scroll to the bottom of this, we see that there is additional guidance on citing material. So again, you know, lack of clarity can be one of the reasons students struggle with academic integrity. They're not sure what the expectations are. This assignment makes crystal clear what is expected in terms of what academic convention should be followed to adhere to academic integrity policies. So I just wanted to share those again as examples of well-designed assignments that were created by some of your colleagues. You should have them as documents. They're also on the FCIP website. There is another example. I won't walk through it right now. But that example does a nice job of providing student